Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Kara Crossway Brindle. Welcome back to the channel. I have Ashley with us again. Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
So we are going to talk about something a little edgy because you know I'm not afraid of that on this channel. And what you need to know about Ashley and I, as you've got to know us better through the channel, is we've both declined doctorate programs historically in the past. We've said no, thank you, not for me. I'm going to let that land for a second. Saying no to a doctorate is something that most of our community would be like, why? Why would you say no to a doctorate if you had the opportunity to go? So this all came up. So I recently did interview for a doctorate, and I was talking to Ashley about some other projects and happened to learn this about you as well. So let's jump in. Let's talk about it. I think right now you're in a doctorate. So obviously that
Yeah.
wasn't a forever plan for you.
Yeah.
But what do you want our viewers to know about your process?
I went to college at a university that was very, very research heavy. Most of my friends went straight into a master's or PhD, medical school, dental school. And when I told my advisor I was applying to MSW programs, she was disappointed and didn't hide. And she
Oh,
said, all of my advisees apply to clinical psych PhD programs. You're the only one
mm,
who hasn't. Like, will you reconsider? Um, and it was quite a shock. And it really kind of severed that relationship that I thought I had with her.
mm,
And I ended up getting my MSW, my master's in social work, and it was a great fit. And then I thought I'd go straight through to PhD, and I started looking at programs and I toured on um, one campus, and all of the students were very, I don't want to speak for them, but they presented as very stressed and dissatisfied with
mm,
their program. I would say like mostly their whole life for those several years, not because of like that specific school or specific program. So I veered then, and then I started a doctorate in social work, so DSW, which is very clinical focused, 2 years ago. And I was so excited, so excited, so excited. And 2 weeks in, I was like, I hate this. I hate this. I
oh,
hate this. I hate this. Like, do I keep going and force myself to do it, or do I stop?
mm.
I'm really glad I stopped. So, mhm,
Yeah. So like I feel like what we're starting to normalize in this video so far is this is really about fit. It's
mhm.
not go to a doctorate or don't pursue a doctorate. It's is it the right fit doctorate? I mean, there's so many doctorate options
Yeah,
available, clinical, research focused, education and supervision focused, as just three
right.
examples. And so it
Mhm.
sounds like that one was very clearly not a good fit 2 weeks in, where you're like, nope, this is not it.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
that particular program had a lot of group work. Um, and I sort of realized, like, at this stage of my education, I have a very, very, very specific focus, and not a lot of other people are interested in that topic. And so it would have been a waste of my time to like sacrifice that and
Right.
sacrifice my practice and research goals to, participate in projects that didn't align with what I wanted or my interests. And it would have, same for people who would have come and joined my side. Like it's a disservice to them too.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so definitely
I
something
mean,
to think.
it's interesting because as I'm hearing you talk about this, the first time I even had curiosity about a doctorate, like your experience was like I went to a school where it was like normalized, like this is just where you're headed. For me, it was 2017 when I started thinking about it, and so I had just opened a group private practice. I was like chugging along, and typical Type A person, like what's next, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, let me
Oh
see about a
yeah.
doctorate. And I went back to one of my alum programs and was like, oh, they have a remote doctorate. This sounds perfect. I won't have to stop working in my business. I can do this where I go out like twice a year or whatever it was at the time and make it happen. And I remember getting that rejection and being like, "Ah, what are you talking about? Like, I've done all the things. I'm in private practice. Like, this should work." But it really was a blessing in disguise to get that rejection because I went into burnout almost like 6 months later from that. Of like, I was overworked already. To add a doctorate, if I'd been accepted, would have not been a fit. I probably would have failed it actually, which is hard to say as someone who hates failure. But at the time, now I feel like it was a blessing. And then recently started thinking about it again, which at this point in my life, I have a toddler at home. So like there was a lot of different things I was looking for now when it comes to this conversation about fit with a doctorate, right? Of like, how
Yeah.
flexible is it? Are the people happy? Do they look like they have work-life balance? Like I'm not here to get in burnout again.
Mhm.
And you and I talked a lot about this off this recording of like there was just some things that it seemed were clear on the website, but then when you actually go and interview, it was very different than what I
Right.
expected. And I think
Yeah.
you had a similar experience that way with your interviews. Is that right?
Yeah. What was most surprising to you?
Uh, I mean, when I went to someone I knew in the program first and said, "Tell me your experience." You know, like I think we all do that naturally. Of like, let me get the dirt, let me get the real story from
Yeah.
this person. So I got the story of their experience, which now I'm like still so very grateful that they shared their experience, but their experience would be different than mine as someone with a young child. And so I'm just going to own that on this video. Um, and so when I went in and was like, "Tell me about your typical week," it was like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. Like
Yeah.
you were going to be in this program 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to do that. And so when I was told this is flexible, this allows family, this is like, it's doable. What I actually heard from the students and the faculty was this is still your first priority.
Mhm.
And that's just not possible, not at this stage in my life. So I was most surprised by that, if I'm being honest.
I believe
Yeah.
it. Believe it. Um,
What
I
about for
also
you?
want to point out, I want to back up for a second because I was actually rejected from what I thought my top choice school was a couple years ago when I applied to DSW programs. And I was like completely shocked. I thought my, personal statement was great and my research aligned with a couple specific faculty. And that was a blessing in disguise, like you said, because I ended up leaving that place of employment that would have allowed
Mm,
me to do all that research. And so it's interesting how things kind of happen. And then looking back,
wow.
you're like, oh, it did happen for a reason because I wouldn't have been able to finish that program, or at least not in the way I envisioned.
Right. Yeah. Like just like that spiritual, everything happens for a reason, peace or hindsight, whatever we want to call it. And we can normalize, like there's probably lots of people who are going to watch this who are like, yeah, I've applied and I've been declined, I've been rejected, I've been told no. I think that's just part of this like message of success, right? We've talked in other videos about you're successful if you have a full-time private pay practice. You're
Mhm.
successful if you have a group practice. And I think a lot of people now are like, you're successful if you go to a doctorate level, which each of us have our own reasons for wanting a doctorate. For me, it was like I hit some glass ceilings in
Mhm.
trainings and I wanted to be at certain tables. And so I was like, I need to go and continue. But now, and I've already said this to you, Ashley, like now I'm like, I've done so much without a doctorate. I'm going to continue to just like kind of push that envelope of like, how much can I accomplish without it? And see if that changes some things for our colleagues of like, what does leadership look like? What can I do? I've done a lot of the things. I've even done some research. Has it been at that level? Absolutely not. Um, but I think there's something to be said about like we could do a lot with a master's degree, and yet some people will still pursue a doctorate. And as long as it's a fit, I think you and I would be like, absolutely, please do that. Please do what's right for you.
That's so interesting because when I've looked at doctorate programs in the past, it's like, oh, you can teach. And I'm like, I do that already. Oh, you can do research. I do that already on a very, very, very small scale.
Yeah,
I do
right.
not at the level a lot of universities would afford me to do. Um, and then it's, oh, you can broaden your scope of practice. Okay, how? And like
Right. Tell me how.
my
Yeah.
practice, and then you could do some testing or evaluations, and I'm like, I do that based on my education and training and experience already. And so I think it is interesting to look at, wait, how else can I earn my seats at these tables? And you and I have talked a lot about building relationships and not being afraid to insert yourself in a place where maybe we've been told we don't belong because we don't have the PhD. And I think a lot of times people can be surprised on what we do have to offer with just a master's.
Right. Like that language. Ugh. Yeah. Like,
I know.
just.
I know.
Um, and, we're part of an amazing community here in Colorado that I think people are doing amazing things without a doctorate. And so we can say that with like some pride and excitement and like inspiration that we feel towards them. And yet there are still going to be wonderful colleagues who also get a doctorate, right? So I don't think you and I are like championing like don't get a doctorate or do get a doctorate. I think we're just saying like there's a lot to consider here, and it's a big investment, not just in money, but time. Right?
I'm
Like I've been in the field 14 years. And so to think about going back, this is my own shit going on this video right now, but like think about going back and having someone tell me to write a paper just to write a paper does not feel exciting to me. Right? Like
yeah.
I've written books, I've written papers, but I want to do it because I want to or it feels relevant, not because it's busy work. And so when people are reading through a program's coursework online or getting a chance to interview, I definitely would hope most people would have a chance to interview. I think that was the eye opening element for me of like, oh, it looked good on paper, but when I'm hearing about it, it is nothing like what I thought it was going to be. And so it was
Yeah.
not a fit.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine I'm the only one who had that experience where it's like, looks good in
Oh, it's
writing,
not
but
gonna
then
pan
heard
out.
from people
Yeah.
that it's like, you're here and this is your whole life. And it's like, I can't do that with a business that's 10 years old. I can't do that with a 2 year old. Like, it's a
Mhm.
hard no for me. And
Right.
so to finish my story for people who've watched this far, what I ended up doing is I processed this with my closest colleagues. I talked to several of them and said, this is what showed up for me. I talked to my spouse, who I think honestly was a little relieved because he's like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And then I wrote to the faculty and I said, thank you so much for allowing me to interview today. So, like, this was like 4 hours later. Thank you for allowing me to interview today. Unfortunately, this isn't a fit for my priorities right now, which is my family and my business. And they were like, understood. Right. So, like, the response was positive, and I don't think it surprised anyone because they heard from me throughout the day, the whole day interview, that I was concerned about this because I kept asking all the people I could, tell me, do you have a family? Do you do any of this? Like, do you have a business? And so that's the end of my story for now, in the sense of I'm not going to pursue a doctorate at this stage. Maybe eventually it'll show up again and be a better time, better fit, but it's probably not when I have a 2 year old or a toddler who still needs a lot from me. And so, anyone who has families who's watching this right now, I hope you're feeling seen.
Yeah, for sure.
So, tell us how you got to a program you actually are enjoying. Because I think as I'm saying no, you finally said yes. So, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I got to the point where I really wanted to do a major research project and felt like I needed like the backing of a dissertation chair, for example, or a university or an IRB in order to
Mm-hmm.
be able to do that. So that was really my main drive, that and ego, like to be honest. Um, because like you and I have talked about, I don't need a PhD to do what I want to do and what I love to do. I'm already doing it. I have a business. I love the client population I serve. I love the services I provide. And, I don't have kids. And so we don't have that in common, but I have finally found some sort of balance in my life, in a way I didn't, 5 or 10 years ago. And so the flexibility and work-life balance, work-school life balance was really important to me. And so I just opted to do an online program, and I take, 1, 2, or 3 classes at a time. They're all built around my dissertation. Every single assignment has to do with the problem statement, the research question. How are you going to do this? Why are you going to do this? Why does it matter? And that really spoke to me because I'm not doing those assignments just to write an assignment.
Right.
Um, so I do feel like it's a good fit right now. Talk to me in maybe a year when I'm another year in, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, am I still going to be moving at this pace? I hope so, but things could change. Um, and you kind of said too, you have a supportive spouse. I have a really supportive spouse. I have a really supportive colleague group at this point who are really interested in what I'm doing.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. Sometimes it's a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not a
I don't think that
procrastinator.
changes.
Yeah. I'm not a procrastinator, but even Wednesday I found myself like right up until the deadline just because, you know, in my mid 30s, like I got school, I got life, I got work, I have clients, I have all these things going on. It's not like undergrad or even in my master's program where it was just school.
Yeah.
And so my like identity has changed a little bit more too with
Yeah.
how I'm a student and how I show up as a student.
Well, I think it's so reassuring to capture this on video of like, I can think of several colleagues, including yourself, who found programs who are a fit where everything does feel in alignment with where they're headed versus the busy work. I think it's also worth naming something you and I talked about previously before we said, let's do a video on this, which is asking some questions about the faculty, their research. Are they working with clients right now? Like, to me, that's super important. Of like, if you're not
Yeah.
a foot in the field, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to learn from you. I mean, that sounds really snotty on this video, but like, I want to know that you're still in it, that it's not
Yeah.
completely academic. It's also, I have client contact. I'm working with clients on the things that I'm bringing to the table because I find that so valuable as a part-time adjunct faculty,
Mhm.
right? Of like to be able to say, here's a client scenario, here's a story inspired by true client work. And so I
Mhm.
think that's a missed opportunity if we're in a program where if that feels important to you, it's not happening with the faculty. So this is my tip at the end of this video for people who've gotten this far of like, ask some questions about what their life looks like as
Yeah.
faculty. Are they in the field? Are they doing research? Are they doing both? Because for me, that was really important to hear that all the faculty were in fact in private practice in addition to
Mhm.
being faculty. So that was one positive in the program that I wasn't able to say yes to because of other reasons it wasn't a fit. That was really good to hear.
Mhm.
Any thoughts for you? Last tips?
I think for me, that's really important. For example, if I had gone straight to my PhD when I was 22, like what did I know about clients?
Mm,
And it's interesting going to some of the more like national or international conferences because I see those students now and no judgment, right? Like they're doing great at what they do, which is research at some of these very academic, research heavy universities.
mm-hmm.
Um, but so, you know, when they're asked questions about, okay, how do you teach that to a client or how do you intervene with an acute client? How do you put your research into practice essentially? And they have no answer. And so that actually was really important to me too, is to find a school. And I've made connections with 3 or 4 peers that I really enjoy as part of my program. And they're all in client work and they're all doing research on the population that they work with. And so that piece is really important to me too.
Yeah, that feels aligned. Absolutely. So lots of food for thought here for folks who've watched the video with us of this conversation. It's fresh for me and just having gone through the process and trying to figure out what was a fit for me and if a doctorate's a fit for my future or not. And for Ashley, finding a program that you finally enjoy, that you're like, this is the fit, and honoring your instinct when you're like 2 weeks into a different program saying this is not it. I think that's really inspirational too, of like, we don't have to just like white knuckle through
Yeah.
something. I don't think we're at that stage in our careers any longer. And even in young parts of our career, I don't know if that was okay. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably why people are burnt out by 7 years in, if I'm being honest. So
Sure.
I love hearing your story and I appreciate your
You
comfort telling us
too.
where you're at. Absolutely. So I'm sure people are going to have some questions, some thoughts. Again, I hope it's coming through loud and clear that Ashley and I are just wanting to broach a conversation that people aren't having online very often. Of is a doctorate a fit and how is it a fit, and know that you don't have to commit to a doctorate if it's not a fit or it's not part of your plan at this stage. So that is what our whole motivation for this video was. Thank you, Ashley, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I'm sure we can always check back in with Ashley in a year, see if she's still
Yeah.
still happy.
You
If
do.
that feels good. And otherwise, we will see you on future videos, everyone. See you next time.